Mela, started recording, tam,
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to those who are physically present in the room and to those who are joining us through the online link. We have a decent turnout of around 40 to 50 people. For those of you who are here for the second lecture, there is no need to introduce Professor Robledo, but for those of you who are here for the first time, Professor Marco Robledo is from the island of Mallorca, from the University of the Balearic Islands, and through a recent agreement which we have signed to create something called T4 Malta. Professor Robledo is in Malta for a sabbatical. He arrived here in September this year and will be with us until the end of January. And primarily he is doing work on establishing T4. Very briefly, the concept of T4 is to bridge the wide gap between tourism academia and tourism practitioners. There is a lot of material produced by academia which never reaches practitioners, and perhaps as well there is a lot of knowledge and experience produced by practitioners from which academia is relatively detached and sheltered. And we are working with and under the guidance of a very well-known and respected name in the tourism academic world, Professor Jafar Jafari, who in the early 1970s was the founding editor of a very revered journal called the Annals of Tourism Research. Those of us who have studied tourism at one point during our lives will have encountered Annals of Tourism Research. And with Professor Jafari, who is based, he's now retired, but spent most of his career at the University of Wisconsin-Stout in the US. And we have brought T4 to Malta with a view to carrying out initiatives to bridge this gap between the two fields. And the sabbatical, resulting in Marco's presence here for a 6-month period, is one manifestation of the forum. We have taken advantage of Marco's presence here and taken advantage of his kind offer to deliver a number of masterclasses. This is the second one that we are carrying out. Today, Marco will be taking us through a model which he developed himself, the ETC model, the evolution of tourist consciousness, and based on the quality and the interest aroused from this first masterclass, I am sure that we will all find it very useful to follow him for the next 1.5 hours, because I have to say in his face that although he is very humble and very quiet, we are honored to have with us a very high caliber tourism academic who knows what he's talking about. I'd also like to thank CEO Carlo for the time to join us. I hope he will manage to stay for as long as possible. If allowed. So to make that possible, I'll shut up at this point. Pass on to you.
Thank you.
And let's not forget that we have the online audience.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie, for your kind introduction. And thank you all for being here again. For me, it's an honor to address this audience again. I see there is a number of repeaters, so that's a good sign. And well, let's crack the tourist code. heard about an Englishman, an Italian, and a Pole who came to Malta for their holidays? I'm not going to tell you a joke about nationalities. What I'm going to tell you about today is that traditional segmentation criteria is not only outdated, but is relatively useless for predicting tourist behavior and motivation. In the tourism industry, we've been led to believe that things like nationality, age, income tells us everything we need to know about a tourist. And it's not enough. It's too superficial. It could be stereotyping. So we need like more nuanced models that tells us more about the tourists that are coming, why are they coming here, what are their motivations, and how are they going to behave while they are here. Obviously, this kind of information is very useful, but it's more useful for counting numbers, for counting heads, and for example, route planning, yeah, than for predicting tourism and tourist behavior. For example, in my case, let's talk about nationalities. I'm Spanish, yeah, and they say that we Spanish are very extroverted people, outgoing. Well, I'm kind of introverted in my case, yeah. They also say that the Spanish are impunctual. I'm rather punctual, yeah. But I'm not saying that these cultural stereotypes are not valid for or are valid for nothing. Yeah, they are useful. And for example, once Ushi came to pick me up at home for going to the office, and I was 3 minutes late. Yeah. And I apologized because it's Austria. No? So, you know, the notion of punctuality is different for a Spaniard. For me, it was perfectly punctual than probably for an Austrian. Had it been Leslie picked me up, as he does almost every day, I wouldn't have apologized because we are Mediterranean mates and we have the same notion of punctuality. For example, if a Maltese bus flies 3 minutes late, probably it will be in the national news, and and the driver will be like considered a national hero or something like that. Yeah, but as I said, for predicting tourism behavior and motivation, we need other kind of models, not only based on demographics and even psychographics. You know, psychographics obviously gives you more information, but they are models in general, criteria that are too static. And that's why I developed this model that I'm going to present today that is called the evolution of tourist consciousness model. It's a model grounded in developmental psychology and stage theory, whose fundamental assumption is that tourism evolution is not only a socioeconomic phenomenon, but a developmental one. That means that tourism evolved in parallel with human consciousness. And this field of developmental psychology, I'm going to give you the background of the model before we jump into it. Developmental psychology is a discipline that studies how humans evolve and mature over time. Means we humans, yeah, we change throughout time. When we are children, that's how the discipline started, you know. Applying that to the behavior of children, we pass through very clear stages, yeah. But as we grow up and we become adults, we also suffer a very predictable kind of evolution. And that's the main tenet of a school of thought that is called stage theory. Stage theory says that we evolve throughout very predictable and sequential stages, throughout our lives. Obviously, for example, a child or a toddler learn how to crawl first, then they start walking. So these are stages that all of them follow, and they follow this pattern. Nobody learns how to walk before crawling, So the same happens in our adult ages. A cross comparison of the so many models that have been developed to document this human evolution demonstrate a very striking fact, that this cross comparison results in a lot of parallelism on the different models, even though each model here, I'm showing only 4 or 5 of them, but there are hundreds of models, and they all have like 6 to 8 stages that are basically the same, named with different names, a bit of a difference among them, but at the end of the day, they are talking about the same. And the thing is that each one of those models, normally, they are focused in a very particular line, or if you want me to tell it in a more plain kind of language, would be type of intelligence. So there are models that are focused on the cognitive line, how our cognition evolves throughout time. Other models are focused on our needs. For example, one of the models you are going to know, I'm sure you're familiar with, that is a developmental model, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Normally in marketing, we don't study it as a developmental model, but at the end of the day, it is a developmental model. We'll see later. Then there are others like self-identity, morals, spirituality, and so on. So they are all focusing in different aspects of ourselves. But at the end of the day, the stages all those researchers have found are basically the same. So what I've done is, before getting into my model, just to give you a more clear idea, I'm not going to go into the details because it's not the objective of this session, and it will be too long to go into these details. But this is to say to 8 stages are something or look something like this. I'm gonna just show you names and pictures, and I hope the pictures are descriptive enough of the stage. So we human beings start in an instinctual stage, right? Then we move on, all of us move on to a kind of tribal stage. Following, we proceed to an impulsive stage. Some of us move on to the next stage, that is the traditional worldview. And all of us here, I'm sure that we have proceeded into the rational achieving stage. I'm saying that at least in the cognitive line, because you are all university graduates or you are studying in the university. So if you are there, it means that you are in this stage. Okay? In this stage of development. The next stages, maybe some of you have arrived to that stage, others have not yet, others never will, maybe, because the difference between infants and adults is that when we are children, we proceed throughout the supposed stages we have to follow in a very predictable and sure manner. If you don't go to the next stage, it's because there is something wrong with you. It's a case of arrested development, right? But at the adult stage, that's something different. Some people move to further stages. Some people just stay where they are because they don't have the need, they don't have the curiosity, they don't have the impulse, or because the environment is not fostering enough for them to proceed into those stages. Yeah. So the next stage is the pluralistic egalitarian stage. And one of the most evolved stages from a developmental point of view, is the integral stage. Yeah, we have 7 stages, that I think just by looking at the picture, they are clear enough of what I'm talking about. There are more stages, but obviously those stages are very rare among us. Probably none of us, maybe one among all of us, is in a further stage than the integral stage. Maybe somebody meditating in a cave in Nepal, is at this stage, but it's a very rare kind of state. But we know the evolution of human consciousness, how it goes, and we know what are those additional stages. I mean, the experts in those fields have mapped like 6 to 8 stages more than this, that maybe there are only a 0.5% of the human population at those stages, or a 0.05% for the latest stages. But they have identified people at those stages and they have described their characteristics. This is individual evolution. But individual evolution interacts with a social evolution. So this is individual evolution results, at the end of the day, in a social evolution that have gone from pre-modern societies to modern societies to postmodern societies to metamodern societies. Metamodern societies are still societies that are meant to be, hopefully, if we get there. We are now in the postmodern stage. So we could and we can predict the future, by identifying individuals that are in the vanguard of evolution. We will know, or we can know, how our future evolution as individuals is going to be. Obviously, I've read. I've been many years working with developmental models. For me, it was like one of those big aha moments in my life. I really said, wow, this is something that really helped me understand other people and why they behave the way they behave, why they think the way they think. So if you are interested in those models, I encourage you to read further. For example, a very general kind of model, not specific, of a line. And I would say that divulgative and easy enough to understand is called spiral dynamics. There is a book, original book, written by Beck and Cowan. So if you want to read about this topic, I strongly encourage you to read that book, Spiral Dynamics. So I was saying that we can predict the future. We can predict the future of our societies, the future evolution of people, your own future evolution. Obviously, I was saying that just by reading what the next stage is going to be, maybe you kind of understand it, but you are not there. Like if I've never played, I don't know, cricket, we were the other day seeing people playing cricket through the window. So I read a book about cricket. And I'm not a professional cricket player, just by reading many books about cricket. So, one thing is the cognitive line, one thing is understanding it, another thing is embodying the stage and living the stage. So what I've done with this framework of developmental psychology is applying this to tourism. My model is the pioneering application of developmental psychology into tourism. I also applied it to consumer behavior in general. Just today, I received, I was telling before Geoffrey and Leslie, that I received very good news because one article I've done about consumer behavior is going to be published soon in a journal published that is the Business Journal of Duke University. That is one of the Ivy League plus universities, so a top 10 university in the world, and they are going to publish my model there. So what I did is applying this knowledge of developmental psychology, I identified the lines that are more relevant for tourism behavior and motivation. For example, the cognitive line, the moral line, the values line, the ego line, etc., etc. I put it all together and I came up with a model of tourist behavior and motivation that I call evolution of tourist consciousness model. This is how the model looks like. These are the most common stages that tourists go through. So they go in a journey from a traditional ethnocentric kind of tourist to an achieving hedonist kind of tourist, to an experiential responsible tourist, to a transformational integrative tourist. Yeah? That's the progression of tourists. So that's where we are going to find most of the tourists that come and visit us, for example, here in Malta. Yeah? Now I'm going to go through the different stages to describe them, but I would say that the potency of this model is not in what each stage is about, but in how the model as a framework works. So after explaining the different stages, I'll go into the model and what it means, this model as a whole. Yeah. As I said, there is a parallelism between individual evolution and collective evolution. So if we have had throughout ages, from the earliest periods of tourism, this kind of tourist, it means that the industry has evolved in parallel alongside interacting. So the industry and the sector of tourism as a phenomenon affects tourists, and tourists and society in general affect tourism. So it's like a joint interaction, you know. So for example, the first level, that is the traditional ethnocentric tourist, the first level that we're going to see here, is characterized for being conventional, absolutist, ethnocentric, and those were the kind of tourists that determined the origins or the earliest forms of tourism. We know that the predecessors of tourism were things like pilgrimages, and we always talk in academic circles about the Grand Tour. Yeah, this trip that members of the aristocracy undertook, normally in Europe, yeah, to be educated on the culture of Europe. They went to Italy, they went to France, etc., to acquire this and to live the culture of those places. And the common element among these two earliest forms of tourism were tradition. You know, this was faith tourism, this was cultural tourism, but the underlying element, the underlying motivator was tradition. Yeah, and traditional ethnocentric tourists are still here. And they are representing a big segment still, and they were the force behind industrial tourism, behind mass tourism, behind the package tour. All of that was because the industry wanted to satisfy the needs of this kind of tourists. And the needs of those tourists are, they are looking for safety, they are looking for familiarity, and they are looking for predictability. So for example, let's look at this wonderful senior couple there. Yeah, they're British. Let's call them Mary and George. Yeah, they come every year to Malta. They stay in the same hotel for the last 20 years in St. Julian's. They always go to a British pub, the Sliema area. Yeah, because was what they want according to their worldview. They value tradition, they value group identity, they value belonging to a group. What they like about Malta is that you are an old colony of Britain. So, yeah, there is a lot in your culture that is the same as in their culture. They can be here as if they were Great Britain, but with good weather.
Away from home.
Home away from home. That's a very good description of what they are looking for. They are looking for a walk home away from home. Yeah. So they prefer organized trips. They prefer to go back to the same hotel, so they know the waiter and they know the housekeeper. They know, they are in a familiar environment. They can be with other British people because there are plenty here, and that's the kind of behavior that they show. Obviously, they like to experience different things, but this experience of otherness is very limited for them. They are not about experimenting. Maybe they try pasticci, maybe they try rabbit stew, but not much more than that. And they have this kind of ethnocentric mentality. Malta is what it is today because of the British Empire. Yeah. So they judge other cultures in relationship to their own, yeah, and they might consider them exotic, but basically they're always inferior to their own culture because they have this ethnocentric mentality. Again, this is still an important segment, although it's the lowest in this evolution that we're talking about. Yeah. And it's not only exclusive of senior tourists. And we'll see later that only a portion of those senior tourists are in this stage. So it's not that I'm equating senior tourists with traditional ethnocentric tourists. Not at all. Okay? But, it's a segment where we find a lot of traditional ethnocentric kind of tourists. Are you with me? So let's move on to the next stage. The achieving hedonistic tourist. Okay? This is the dominant kind of a stage nowadays, still. Yeah? Starting to dwindle, but it's still by far the dominant stage where we are going to find most of the tourists. It's a consumerist, a materialist kind of person who conceives tourism as escape mechanism from everyday life. Kind of people make a clear separation between professional life, and leisure. So they work many times to get the material means to afford doing things outside of work. So they think they deserve to enjoy with life after being, for 11 months a year working. So that's holidays is a very important aspect of their lives, but it's an escape mechanism from their lives as well. They are motivated by success, status, and achievement. Yeah. So that's why with these two elements we see kind of the portrait or the stereotype of people. They are the party goers, but they are as well the shopping tourists that go to Milan for the weekend. Yeah. And it's as important for them to go there, to enjoy, and to show that they have been there, because it's a way to prove their status in society. Yeah. They enjoy material comfort, entertainment, convenience, luxury. Yeah. This is the dominant kind of tourism today. It goes all the way from the package tour, all inclusive, to the luxury, kind of tourist. Depending on where you are in the social scale, you will afford one or the other, but tourism today has become a fundamental component of our lives and our leisure. We move into the next stage, the postmodern stage of tourism, where we find the experiential, responsible tourist. This is a wonderful kind of tourist, because if you own a piece of land, small farm, something, yeah, get them, they come, they harvest your vegetables, they collect your olives, and they pay you. Amazing. For the previous level, it would be amazing. You're paying to work. Yeah. But this is the kind of people that we find at this stage. They are motivated by connection, awareness, and responsibility. Yeah. They're interested in the sustainability of what they are doing. So they are seeking for authenticity. They are seeking for ethics, and they are seeking for meaningful experiences. It's not any kind of experience that they are looking for. Tourism, at the end of the day, is an experience in itself. They are looking for authentic, meaningful experiences. That's why they might go with a farmer and learn from them how to prepare estira. Yeah. How do they do their harvest? How to carve limestone or things like that. They want to learn from the traditions. They want to mingle in the social life. It's not that normally they say, I'm not a tourist, I'm a traveler. Yeah. So they tend to stay longer. Yeah. I'm here in a homestay where I can, in a longer stay, where I can experience the culture of the place, be with the locals. So this is the kind of tourism they're looking for. They're not looking for the 2 days holidays, been there, seen that, done that. They're looking for something more profound. Yeah. So they are looking for slow kind of travel, local engagement, cultural immersion, and they are the ones who are trying to get off the beaten track. Yeah. Not going to the places that everybody goes, not going to the Tower of Pisa and take the selfie there. Yeah, that's for the tourists. Yeah, I don't want to be part of that. Yeah. So all these emerging kinds of tourism that we have nowadays, they are becoming increasingly important, like sustainable tourism, responsible tourism, volunteering tourism, are very representative of this stage, because that's what this kind of customer wants. Yeah. So let's proceed to the next stage, the meta-modern tourism, the transformative or the transformational integrative tourist. This kind of tourists, for them, the outer journey is an excuse for an inner journey. If we see the Maslow's pyramid, self-actualization and transcendence in the last stage. So that's what they are looking for. Their fundamental need is growth, self-awareness, inner development. So they use tourism as a mechanism to become a new self, a better self, to develop, right? So their holidays are for them opportunities to grow and to experiment with new ways of being. There is a very interesting and growing type of tourism that is called transformational tourism. Yeah. And transformational tourism that can be is more like a transversal kind of tourism rather than a type of tourism itself. And it can be found in things, well, you here have very descriptive examples. Volunteering tourism. You are doing volunteerism. This is going to transform you by the experience that you're living of helping other people in need, for example, being immersed in those cultures. This is going to transform you. Educational tourism is another very transformational kind of tourist. Anybody who has been abroad studying in their young years, yeah, you go to the place being one person, you come back from the place being a different person. All of us who have been there, we know it perfectly. And then we can find pilgrimages like Road to Santiago or I don't know, spiritual tourism or shamanic tourism. Here is probably an ayahuasca kind of experience. You know, that's one of the most transformational things that you can have. So the good thing about this kind of tourism is that unlike other sectors that are transformational in themselves, you know, like education, you know, when you are studying, yeah, you are studying to be transformed into a different kind of person, yeah, to a professional, into a mature, with more resources kind of being, yeah. But the day-to-day is tough because you have an exam tomorrow, but today there is a football match that you really want to see, yeah. Or you have an exam next week, but you really want to go out with your friends today. Yeah. So that's a sacrifice that some people can do and others don't. Yeah. The same with health tourism. You go to the doctor and the doctor tells you you need to change your way of life. You need to stop smoking, you need to stop eating fat, you need to stop. How many people do it? Yeah. Very few, according to the statistics, a really small minority of about 5%. Even their life is threatened by their illness, they don't get to change their life. Yeah? Because that's a sacrifice they have to do. When we are in this kind of tourism, yeah, maybe you have to do some things, but you go about it with a different mentality. Maybe you go to New York for running a marathon. Yeah, I mean, I was doing a study recently published that is about the hurricane heat event. Yeah? That's kind of adventure sports tourism. It's a very tough kind of trial that you do with teams, you know, but you need to be extremely fit. The origin of it was they organized how do they call it? Well, a trial, a sort of run, a long run that was supposed to take place. I think it was in Thailand, yeah. And they announced that it had to be cancelled because there was a hurricane coming, you know. So there was a bunch of people who got together and say, okay, we are here, we traveled all this way to do this run, we are going to do the run no matter about the hurricane. And they did it. And since then, you know, this event is called the hurricane heat event, and it's organized all over the world, but it's like the toughest of the toughest kind of trials that you can have. Yeah. And well, the kind of sacrifice you do there is incredible, you know. But these people do it, and they do it willingly. And so same happens with all this kind of transformational tourism, where people, you know, are experimenting at the end of the day with new ways of being, and they're putting themselves, in many cases, through difficulties, through hardships, and so on, and they take it more willingly than in other occasions, in other aspects of their lives, because for them, tourism is something that they are welcome. Yeah. And this level of tourism, the personal, the inner development, goes hand in hand with the pro-social, pro-environmental, and conservation kind of behaviors. So that's the model. Yeah? And that's the evolution. Yeah? There are other levels, but they are still too minoritary, and some of them, even here, there is another level that I prefer to left it out. But as I said, important thing, not the levels themselves that are important as well, is how the model works, because you might be thinking, well, this is yet another typology of customers, of tourists, and there are many typologies of tourists. Yeah. But what is different about this model is how it works as a whole. Yeah, because this is not a model that boxes people in a particular typology. Yeah, as I said, this is an evolution. Yeah, so if I'm at this level, according to developmental psychology, this is not an exclusionary model where you are like this and you are no longer like the other previous levels. All the resources that you have in the previous levels are within you. So it might happen that you are in this experiential responsible level, but you can still benefit from the hedonist kind of tourist. So let's say that somebody comes here to Malta for a bachelor's party. Yeah. If you identify this person, you will classify as an hedonist. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that he's all the time, or he's operating most of the time through this stage, or could he be or she be in a different stage or further stage, but for this occasion, he's just having fun with their mates. Yeah, we don't know. We need to find this information. But the way the model, the developmental psychology works, is that we transcend and include the previous stages. Sometimes more complicated than that. We transcend and marginalize the previous stages, because sometimes you achieve this stage and you refuse the previous stage. So this is a very clear example, the experiential responsible kind of tourist who despises this kind of tourists because they are consumerist and materialist and, you know, capitalist and so on. Yeah. But if you integrate well the previous stage in a healthy way, it means that the previous stages are still within you. So it's like a Russian doll model where we have the other stages within us. Yeah. So that's why I was criticizing previously the traditional segmentation criteria that, for example, tell you you are Gen X or you are Gen Z. Gen Zs, how are we have some Gen Zs in the room, I guess. Yeah. So how are Gen Zs? Yeah? They say that Gen Zs, for example, are culturally conscious or culturally open. Really? Yeah. I guess that a majority of Gen Zs are culturally open, but what they are really meaning is that the Gen Zs nowadays are reaching this stage easier than we used to. A 70 years old probably got stuck in this stage or in this stage, yeah, and haven't transcended to the further stages because that person didn't find the need or didn't find the environment that helped them achieve this new stage, right? Like when I was studying my MBA in London, yeah, back in the 90s, everybody in the room was at this stage, the achieving hedonist stage. Very rare that somebody was in the experiential responsible stage. Yeah. Nowadays, I'm directing an MBA course, yeah, and most of the people there, the majority of the students, there are many here as well, but the majority of the students are already there. And many of you probably are here, you know, because you are living in a society that is supporting your development. Yeah? If you are living in a different kind of society, maybe you are not going to get to this stage so easily, regardless of age. Yeah? So that's the fundamental flow of this like age or demographic kind of segmentation. You know, like my son, he's 15-year-old. Yeah, he's a Gen Z, but he didn't still have the time to achieve this stage. He's still having some ethnocentric kind of mentality. Gen Zs, according to the books, yeah, they have a world-centric kind of mentality, tolerant, open, inclusive, and so on. Yeah, if you are 20, yeah, but if you are 15, you are still here, you know. So I'm still trying to, when he makes some kind of statements, and say, no, son. Yeah, so I'm trying to educate him to transcend to the next stage. And probably next year, he will be here. Yeah? Because his mind progressively is opening up. But it's not that you are Gen Z and by spontaneous combustion, yeah, you have all the characteristics of a Gen Z. It's an evolution, right? Okay? So that's the way it works. Developmental psychology tells you that you are not in a particular stage. You operate most of the time in a good day from the higher stage you have achieved. And as I was saying, this is complicated. So don't box people in a particular level. Yeah, because that person maybe cognitively is here, but emotionally they are here or even lower. Yeah, or morally they are there, you know, so they are going to have a very different distribution. This is a very complex, because we are human beings and we are complex. Yeah, so that's what this model is telling you, that rather than classifying people into labeling people, what we have to know is understanding the individual, yeah, and acting accordingly. So it's a bottoms-up approach that we start with the individual and we end up in the groups, grouping them into different categories. And the next thing that is important to consider about this model is that it's telling us how the tourism evolution is going. For those of you that were here in my previous session, my previous masterclass, what I did is I explained this progression of the economic value model. Yeah, I'm gonna remind you of the model right now. So especially for those of you who weren't here, but we see a clear parallel between this model of progression of economic value and the evolution of tourist consciousness, obviously, because there is an interaction. Yeah, tourists are asking for certain things, so the industry is evolving accordingly. So we have evolved from an industrial kind of tourism to a tourist based on quality and so on, to a tourist that is emphasizing experiences, to a tourism that is emphasizing transformations in the future. That is what is coming. So we know because this is the distribution of tourists, we know because there are studies that demonstrate that the traditionalists are dwindling. You know, there are less and less traditionalists, yeah, at a mature age. Obviously, you have to go through there, yeah. So there's always going to be people at the traditional stage, but when we achieve an age, yeah, where we have the means to spend our money in a holiday, we are going to be in a future stage. So this is disappearing in terms of the highest stage. Then this is the majority of people still here at the hedonist, the achieving hedonist, but as well is losing importance in favor of the responsible experiential kind of tourist. And that's why experiential tourism is achieving such an importance nowadays. That's why we are having this evolution that I explained you in the previous session. Yeah. And the next stage is going to be the transformational kind of tourism. Yeah. So if we want to plan for the future, what we want to do at the country level, for example, our strategy needs to be anticipating this change in customer preferences that is going to go into the experiential and transformational kinds of tourism. And not only that this is the previsible evolution, but it's also what I think our society needs, our planet needs, because what these people are demanding are more conscious kind of tourism, more sustainable kind of tourism, more responsible kind of tourism at the end of the day. And I think we desperately need that at a societal level and at a planetary level. You had a question.
Am I understanding correctly that you're saying?
Do we need a microphone for the people? No? Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying for the audience.
Okay.
Okay.
So am I understanding correctly that eventually the traditional tourist will vanish?
Not vanish,
But
but
will
reduce its
reduce.
importance.
So my next question related to this. So you're mentioning Gen Z. And so Gen Z are starting at a higher level than where we started, my age group started. What will happen with the generation Alpha or the generation Beta? Will they start at higher level?
Well, it's not that they start at a higher level. We all start at 0 level. We all start
Always.
as a toddler. And we
Yes.
start our evolution from there. The difference is that Gen Z, is growing in a society
Which is much more.
that is more evolved. Yeah, that is kind of more inclusive, more socially and environmentally conscious, and so on. And that's something that you were socialized into. In our age, when we were their age, for example, of these people here in their 20s, early 20s, or even less than that, at that age, we didn't have this input in our society so much. We were living in a very highly consumerist, materialistic society, and we wanted to be jobbies in the future. Yeah. So the transition is quicker for them to achieve higher stages because the environment is helping them achieve those stages quicker than we did. Yeah. So generation alpha not only will achieve the experiential responsible stage quicker than we did, if we have, but they will achieve the integral stage, the next stage, the transformational stage, even in the 20s. That is something that is extremely difficult nowadays. Nowadays, let's go to the general model, finding somebody at this stage, at the integral stage, in their 20s is very, very, very difficult. The same as I was telling you that in our early 20s, being in the pluralistic egalitarian stage in the 80s, it was difficult. Yeah. Now it's a common thing. So generation alpha probably will achieve this stage very easily, especially if we add technologies. Technologies are gonna we employ them in a good way because technology is neutral, so we can use them for the good or for evil. Like mobiles that we are using nowadays. But there are technologies that help you, get into altered states of mind, and that can help you transition to these higher stages. And this is going to be a huge revolution. So my prediction is that these people very early will achieve these higher stages.
And that leads me to the same question, an extension of the question. Will these beta generation, alpha generation, whoever arrives at the integral part, remind me of, I don't know if you read Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. Now he starts his journey from place in Spain, goes all the way to Egypt, and goes back to Spain. So his transit will the tourist be staying at home?
That's a good question.
Rather than travel? Integral.
I said that the characteristic of the transformation and integrative kind of tourist is that what is important for them is the inner journey. Sometimes you can achieve that inner journey regardless of where you are. You can do it at home, and especially with the help of new technologies, we all talk about virtual tourism and this kind of thing. It can help you have a very similar experience while being at home. But yeah, I think in the future, traveling is a fundamental characteristic of the human being. I don't think that any technology and any human evolution is gonna detract us from doing that. We will always need it. But maybe, all the traveling that we are doing today, we will do it at home, or most of the traveling, and we will travel more local. We don't need to go to the other side of the world to discover ourselves. You can discover yourself at home, So, probably the kind of traveling, because of the circumstances that we're having in front of us, the environmental crisis and so on, will not be so distant and so on, So who knows? It's difficult to say that. Any other questions? Yeah, Tania, please.
What came to mind is the individual characteristics of how a person is individualistic and egoistic vis-a-vis another person being an altruistic, for example. How does it fit in the model? Having an inner journey could be an individualistic person to a certain extent, and you have an inner journey. But in some way or another, I think that main characteristics within an individual may have an impact also on the stages you evolve in.
That characteristic is integrated in the model. What we see is that the evolution of tourism consciousness go from a more egocentric kind of worldview where you is the important thing and you don't care about the others, to a more ethnocentric kind of worldview, to a more world-centric kind of worldview, you know? So the highest you are in your developmental journey, the more caring, the more inclusive, the more open you will be to the others, and the wider your circle is going to be.
Because we are also seeing and mentioning these extreme groups which are rising, you know, in popularity to a certain extent, or in size, unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's clearly reflected here. Let's go, because my model, in comparison to the wider models, developmental models, my model starts from here, you know, but the previous stages are there. In a wider stage that I have of tourists, I include this stage. These are, you know, two early stages, and we don't have tourists at those stages. But our evolution as individuals, you know, goes from only caring about myself, you know. So if I'm a kid, yeah, and you're having a toy that I like, I'm gonna take it away from you, and I'm gonna hit you. And I'm not gonna care if you cry or you don't cry, because I'm not I don't have the moral capability of getting in your shoes, understanding what you're going through. I'm an egocentric kind of person. I only care about myself. Not that I'm meaner, not that I'm even mean, it's that my moral evolution is not there.
Some people stay like that even when they grow up. But
Of course, some people stay like that. Yeah. So I only care about myself, and might makes right, and I'm based on power. You know, my principle is power, so the stronger one survives. At this level, what I'm incorporating is the perspective of the other. Here I have an exclusively first-person perspective, where there is only a me that is important, yeah? And suddenly I understand there is a you, and I'm able to step into your shoes and understand you, yeah? So I'm widening my circle from me to me and you. So there is a we. But this we at the beginning is very small. Yeah, the we is only my family, for example. So I care about my family. I don't care about the others. Yeah, and suddenly I care about the people in my city, in my town, in my country. Yeah, and suddenly is my country right or wrong. Yeah, that's my mentality. And all the others are wrong. Yeah, the only kind of thinking is that is right is my kind of thinking. I'm here. Yeah, and all the others are, I don't know how to say that in English, herejes. But you know, I have the truth. I have the right religion, and the other are heresies or something like that. Yeah, infidels. Yeah, right. So this is the kind of thinking. Yeah, and suddenly we have a more world-centric kind of view, where we are open to other mentalities, and we accept them as rightful in themselves. Yeah. So the circle of care increases the more developed we are. That's a reason for hope, you know, obviously. Yeah. So the higher we are in these models, the more I'm going to be more conscious of my impact, of others, the well-being of the planet, the well-being of other people, the well-being of the communities I'm visiting as a tourist, and so on and so forth. You know? More questions? Are we doing on time? No? No questions? So that's my proposal. Yeah. And I think that this model can contribute to a more complete understanding of tourism behavior and motivation, a more nuanced understanding of tourism behavior and motivation. And we need to incorporate that into our research and so on. You know, this is a model that has been widely tested, you know, in their origins, you know, so there's plenty of research that demonstrate that this is like the sequence that we are following, but we still haven't done. My model has been presented recently, so it's presented as a theoretical model. I still haven't done research, practical research into that. So I'm giving you assumptions that now maybe 20% of the population is here, maybe 40% of the population is here, maybe another 20% of the population is here and growing, and only 5 to 10% of the population is there, you know, but these are the segments that they are growing, yeah, because more and more people are getting incorporated here, yeah, by cumulative evolution, whereas here they are losing their importance at a social level, yeah.
Does it logically follow that the further up one moves in this evolutionary scale, if I could use the term, leads to a better type of tourist, or is it just a different type? And how does one link it to the perennial concept of quality? And I have three
The
questions.
perennial concept of quality, can you clarify?
Sort of, everybody wants quality tourism. Does this evolutionary scale lead to the
Okay.
Eldorado of quality?
Here.
And the third question is, given that it is an evolutionary scale, does it have space for further evolution?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So, first question. There is something I want to clarify from a developmental psychology kind of view. Higher doesn't mean better. Yeah. 10-year-old is not better than a 2-year-old. Yeah. But obviously, a 10-year-old can do things that a 2-year-old cannot do. Yeah. So I think that's the perfect example for you to understand that higher is not better. This is obviously a hierarchical model, but some people criticize all hierarchies and they say, well, this is a hierarchical model, so it's bad and so on. Yeah, no. Higher doesn't